I'm Sarah Fensky, and this is the 314. Every episode, we sit down with St. Louisans who know what makes this place tick. Together, we explore why things are the way they are and how we can make them better. This episode of the 314 podcast is sponsored by St. Louis Art Museum's Corporate Partner Program. Developer Michael Steinberg is in the midst of the biggest project of his life. An ambitious plan to replace Chesterfield Mall with the new downtown Chesterfield. The $2 billion mixed-use development will include up to 2,363 housing units, restaurants, and office space in a walkable streetscape. Developments that bring city living to suburbia have been popular in other cities, but they're new for St. Louis. For Steinberg, downtown Chesterfield is the culmination of relationships he's built in the West County suburb dating back to the Great Flood of 1993. His more recent work in Chesterfield includes the district and its music venue, the Factory, as well as the Hub. It was interesting to hear him explain how these disparate projects led to his current project and how he sees downtown Chesterfield helping make a better region. He also discussed what's kept him rooted in St. Louis when he could live anywhere. After our conversation, St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Kroll joins us for the closer. He'll explain how a canceled St. Louis company may be making a comeback. But first up, Michael Steinberg, founder and president of the Steinberg Group. Michael Steinberg, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to you.
So I appreciate you coming in today because I know you have so much on your plate right now, and it feels like this really giant project. You're in the middle of reimagining Chesterfield. Is that fair to say?
It's a reimagine. You know, it's an interesting project because it is one of the largest I've ever done, but it really has an interesting history. I went down to the valley and started buying land, and there was no interchange. The levee had it flooded because the levee was a 100-year farmer's levee. It's like saying I drive a car, but it's a 1960 car. So you're driving a 2025 car. It's a car, but I think they're a little different.
Yeah.
So I was able to convince the city, the Corps of Army Engineers, the levee district, MoDOT, the county, the federal government to let us build an interchange to help us fix the levees.
These things were kind of all tied together
They were
in
all
terms
tied
of the
together.
financing.
Right.
Okay.
And so I started in 1994, 95 doing this helpful with Lou Sachs. And I started building Chesterfield Commons. And I'm proud to say that in 1999, we opened the Commons. And it's the longest strip shopping center in America. It's 2 miles long on both sides. And it's about 1.8 million to 2 million square feet, depending on if you count the out parcels or whatever. And it's been very successful. And so you say, why do I bring this up? Because there's a lot to the why I got involved in the mall. So in 2012 or 13, I was approached by the Taubmans, Billy and Bobby out of Detroit. And they came in and said, we want to build an outlet center. And I said, okay, that's great. And there's a piece of land that's wide, but very narrow. And I said, that's great. I looked at it. I said, I don't know how you're going to make any money. And they said, well, we'll make some money. I said, okay. So they said, we need an easement for the sewer and, to the interchange. I said, great. These are the 4 things I want. They weren't minor. They, pay some of the sewer tap fees and don't steal my tenants. And we shook hands. So I became friends with them. And in 2017, they called and said, we're not doing very well. Simon built the center down the street. We probably made a mistake and we want you to buy it. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. You spent $135 million here. What am I going to buy? And well, we worked out an agreement to our advantage. So we bought it, and I had no idea what I was going to do out there. And people said, well, what do you think? I said, I have no idea. This is long before COVID, long before entertainment was an idea. And I came up with this idea that we were approached by Topgolf, which was great. And then Main Event, and I said, well, I'm going to build a music venue out here. And all my friends used the F word. They said, that is the dumbest F thing I've ever heard you do. Why would you do something like that? I said, well, I've always liked music. What do you know? I said, I know nothing about music. I like it. And fortuitously, Brian Karp came into my office about a month after I came up with this idea. And he says, I'm looking to come back here. He'd worked for Live Nations and Shoots Entertainment Group. So I said, okay. I said, Brian, we're going to fly around the country and look at music venues. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, imitation's the finest form of flattery. We got to get out and I got to figure out what we're going to build.
Yeah.
You know, the competition was the Stiefel, the pageant, he'd run these type. And I said, okay. So we went to 20 different venues. And I'd go to the show, but I wasn't interested in talking to the owners or the management. I wanted to talk to the people maintaining it, the people booking it, all the people that ran it, not the general manager. So the thing I learned was that the customer isn't you and I. It's not the ticket buyer.
We're not.
No, we're not.
Who's the customer?
The customer is really simple. It's the artist.
Okay.
If you get the artist, you'll sell tickets.
Yeah.
And I made sure the green rooms, the loading for the roadies, you know, it typically takes 6 to 8 hours to load in a lot of these places. We can do it in 2.
So you want to make this sort of like a blue ribbon, blue chip. What's the word I'm looking for?
Right.
This
Whatever. Yeah,
perfect experience.
Right.
So that the best artists want to come and they'll come back.
That's right. And so that's when I said, Brian, we need to do this. We really do. And that's how I built it. I figured that out. Plus, I wanted to make sure there's 2 things people like: sound, lights, and seats. 3 things.
3 things, yeah.
3 things. You got to have. So our seats, all our seats are first-class airplane ticket seats. And there's, you know, and I lost a couple hundred seats by doing that. And I also wanted to have the flexibility to be able to have a fully seated show and a fully standing room only and seated show. And I have risers that have different levels, and I wanted to make sure, and I figured out the perfect height of the place. It's 52 feet. So
That's the perfect height.
perfect height for sound and lights. And, you know, so I'm sure someone's out there going to copy that, but that's, and I figured that out. I think about the nuances, and people say, what do you want it to look like? I said, I want to look like a factory. It never goes out of style.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for the I am pay type of project. So I did that.
Hence the factory.
Hence the factory. I keep things simple. The district, the factory, the hub. And so I wanted to keep it very simple. And the reason I'm telling the story is, so I started this idea, and, you know, people are sitting there still shaking their head thinking. And we opened on July 11th of 2021, 4 years ago, and I had roots. I lost $100,000.
Wow.
And I said to myself, well, maybe all my friends were right. So I called a team meeting and I said, guys, we can't do this. But the reason I bring this up is because at that time, I said to Tim Lowe, who had run the mall, he never thought that the Commons, we probably do at the Commons $900 to $1 billion of sales. He never thought it would hurt the mall. He worked for CBL, and he's been working for me 15 years. I said, the mall's going out of business. He said, yeah, you're right. I said, we got to buy a department store there because I don't want anybody competing with the district, the factory, and the hub. He said, what a great idea. So he had a friend that worked for Sears in the real estate division. We flew down to Florida, and we said, we want to buy this. And they said, well, here's the price. We said, okay, we'll close. Because I knew if I owned the Sears store, I'd have a seat at the table and nobody could do anything because of the REAs.
And sorry, what are the REAs?
Reciprocal easement agreements.
Okay.
So you had to have an approval of Sears, Macy's, Dillard's, and the mall.
And now you've got Sears.
I got Sears. So I sat there and you had to have all the approvals. So someone bought the mall. You know, CBL gave back the mortgage. It was $188 million. And I tried to buy it and I just couldn't get there with the different person, and they bought it. So they bought it, and Mr. Hall comes to town and he says, well, Mr. Steinberg, we're going to be great partners. I said, I'm not going to be a partner. Don't change a parking spot. I wanted to buy the mall, and I explained to him why I wanted to buy the mall. I didn't want anybody doing anything there. So about 2 years later, he woke up and said, I guess it's time for you to buy the mall.
Because he realized the mall had just reached the end of its life.
Yeah, and he wanted to put lipstick on it. And I sat there and said, well, what can I do to make it better? So I got on my plane with Tim Lowe and a couple other people, and started going across the country again and went to all these downtowns, lifestyle centers. And I said, I don't want a lifestyle center. I want to create a downtown. I want something that's unique, not just putting apartments on a parking lot, not throwing an office building in, not trying to keep the structure. So we hired an architectural firm called Nelson Associates out of Austin. They did the Domain, probably one of the best redevelopments next to a mall that I've ever seen.
This is the Domain. Where is that?
That's in Austin, Texas.
Okay. And this is kind of in your head, this is the gold
This is
standard
the gold
for what
standard.
you want to do.
Right. I went to San Jose. I went a lot of different places to look at stuff. And, I look at things and I take bits and pieces. It's all about the nuances. People don't think about that. Cherry Creek is a perfect example. I like their brick pavers. I like their signage. I met the marketing person, the gentleman that runs it. I said, do you mind if I copy this? No, here. The center in Scottsdale has the best benches I've ever seen. It's, and things like that.
So you're picking up these details here and
Right.
there. What was it you liked so much about the Domain in Austin? What
It
works
felt
about
good.
that?
It felt good. People can't tell you why they want to go, but they can tell you why they don't want to go. It's like a restaurant. You don't want any silent protest. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've been in the restaurant, but I didn't do very well, but it taught me a lot. And that's so what I did was I said, okay, I want to create a downtown. So I went to the city and, I've been in the city since 1995. Dan Hurd, who's now the mayor, has been there since 1995. A lot of the same people have been there, and they were skeptical of what I was proposing. But I said, have I ever let you down? I fixed the commons. I built an interchange that nobody else had ever done. First architectural interchange in the state of Missouri. I said, we built it in 11 months. Everybody told me it was going to take 3 years. Everybody told me it was going to be $35 million. We spent 11. Then I went across the street to the district and did exactly what I wanted. I had to wait until the Polo Club store was out. It took me a while to get them out. And I said, I built the hub. I said, have I done everything you wanted me to do? Yes. So here's my vision. And of course, we had all the skeptics and all the neighbors and all the people about traffic. And how do you know you can do this? How do you know? I said, we're going to do this. So after 5 years of working with the city, I worked with the state, MoDOT, all the utility companies, the county, everybody. We finally have all our permits and approvals. And I started the demolition 9 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, you've had almost a year now of getting rid of what had been there.
Right.
And now there's going to be almost another year's worth of sort of, you have to do the grading. And
Yeah,
the,
16, 18 months, because the reason it took so long to demolish it was, I believe we have to treat the environment right. I recycled 95% of all the material.
And that takes longer.
It does, and more money, but it's the right thing to do. And I'm always interested in, sure, I like to make money, no different than anybody else, but it's important to do the right thing. And so now we're almost done. We're still recycling some of the concrete and the asphalt so we can use it on site. And we're going to start the grading in a month or two, but it's taken time to get everything. Ameren has their own ideas. The city has their own ideas. And so we're finally there.
It's amazing to think of this long road. I mean, when you started this story back in 1993, it actually makes sense. You had to build decades worth of goodwill to get to the point where you could do this.
Right.
Do you feel like this is the culmination of what you've spent your career trying to do as a developer?
I've been very fortunate. I met Samuel. I met Ray Kroc. I met a lot of the icons in the business. I met Stan Kroenke because I was doing Walmart stores. I hear all the time, what do you think? I said, I thank him. I have no animosity. What do you think about the Rams? Okay. He made a business decision. It's not for me to talk about this, but I'm all about making the region better. And I really thought that, when I went out to Chesterfield originally, that this was something important for the region. And people thought, well, that's crazy. Then when I did the factory, nobody's going to drive out. We get people from Soulard, the downtown. I'm not trying to hurt downtown. We have free parking. We have no security issues, knock on wood. I mean, we presented a better mousetrap, you know?
But so as your former business partner, Stan Kroenke, famously pointed out, this is a region that isn't growing. Overall, St. Louis is stagnant. And so when you build something that's amazing, you get a great venue like the Factory where you've thought through every detail, you can get the best artists. That brings energy to an area that didn't have it, but that energy has to come from somewhere. Do you worry that that's taking away people who might have been in downtown St. Louis?
No, not at all.
They're now going to Chesterfield.
I hope that they come from Columbia, Missouri, and say, hey, I want to live, or Springfield. I want more people to move here. I want to make it a better area. And you have to have the goods and services for people to want to live here. I mean, you can't have the same rhetoric. And so I'm trying to make it a better area based on that.
That this becomes something that people say, I can see myself living here. I'll be happy here. It brings them to the region.
That's right. And that's what I'm trying to do. Now, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. And when I grew up there was 250,000 people. Today, there's over 1 million. Why is that? People left the farm. They have better restaurants. They have more entertainment. They have sports teams. So that's you gotta provide the goods and services to get people here. And I'm not just copying. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to go after the Galleria, or I'm going to go after the West County Mall, or I'm going to go after Plaza Front. Like, I'm trying to be unique and bring something that's different.
Who do you see as sort of the downtown Chesterfield resident? Who's going to choose this development?
I see kids up to about 30, 35. I don't see families because it's really not an area for family. I'm sure somebody will move in, but we're really designing it for people who want to downsize. People want to be able to walk. We're going to have in the middle of this, nobody ever does this. I put a 3.3 acre park. Nobody's ever done this. I've gone around the country. It might be on the back side or this side. And I want it to be the place that people gather.
Because you want to build that community.
That's right.
Suburbia sometimes gets derided for not having that opportunity to have that community the way that an old-fashioned city might. That's
Right.
something you've thought about.
I thought about that, and Jeff Tagahoff and, of course, Bob Clark on Wild Horse. They've done a great job. There's 2 lakes. It's about a mile around each lake. It's walkable. There's a YMCA. There's a JCCA. There's the amphitheater. There's a water park. There's a bike way to get down to the valley. So I want something that's unique and really change how we think about St. Louis. And it's interesting, you talk about time. It's 24 minutes from there to downtown.
Yeah.
It's 22 minutes to the airport. It's 16 minutes to Clayton.
We think in St. Louis of these vast distances. These things are actually very close together.
They are, and it's crazy because I also spent time in Denver, and the traffic's horrendous. So within 20 to 22 minutes of downtown Chesterfield, there's over 1 million people that can get there.
My guest today is Michael Steinberg. He's the founder and president of the Steinberg Group. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment. First, a word from our sponsor. Make a real impact in your community and boost your business by becoming a corporate partner of the St. Louis Art Museum. Through the Corporate Partner Program, you'll support free year-round programs and help bring over 125,000 people closer to the arts and to each other. Plus, your investment contributes to strengthening St. Louis as a regional center for economic growth and talent attraction. Learn more at slam.org. And again, we're talking today to Michael Steinberg. Has a wildly ambitious project under development. Apparently has been under development now for decades, really.
Well,
He's been
right.
on the steps.
Yeah, so it just didn't happen. People think, well, that's just, an idea. Well, you can see the progression.
Yeah.
And it's really been a progression. And I would have never guessed in 1993 when I met Lou Sachs. And actually, I knew Steve Sachs' son long before that. I didn't know Lou Sachs. And, I respected that. He wanted a downtown. That's why I named it Downtown Chesterfield.
This is a tribute to his original idea.
And absolutely. And you got to remember how you get here. And I have in one of the roads called Millstone Boulevard.
And this was your mentor.
That's right. I had Tommy Green Boulevard, because he was a mentor. And the guy that hired me I have no idea why in Kansas City in 1976 when I had hair down to here, and he said, I'd like to hire you, Irv Maislish. And I said, okay. And I walk in and he looks at me and says, come on, we're going to the barber shop.
He
So
did not want that long hair.
no, he did not want that long hair. But I mean, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of people. And you got to remember how you got there. And a lot of people don't. And I really strive and figure out how you can remember these people and learn from these people. I had a guy named Gray Turner said to me one day, just shut up. You're smart. You're way smarter than anybody in this room. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Shut up.
And that advice served you well.
It has. But I still have some troubles doing that, but that's okay. But it's been an evolution, and I've built, I have a project in Prairie Center in Brighton, Colorado, still with Stan. It's
Stan
2,000
Kroenke.
Yeah, it's 2,000 acres, and, it's a couple million square feet. And, I mean, so, I've done big projects, but I think this might be the last big project like this. I'm expanding the factories throughout the United States with a gentleman named John Fogelman.
So this prototype you built in Chesterfield, you can take this on the road.
We are, but it's a lot harder than I thought because you have to have the right access, the right parking, the number of parking, the visibility. It's difficult, but we're looking, we have a deal we're working on in Tucson and Tampa, Tulsa. We're trying to get to not the major metropolitan areas. And John used to be chairman of William and Morris, the big talent agency, and he's a Hollywood guy. Yeah.
I bet that opens some doors.
Well, it's interesting, I mean, as I tell everybody, you put your pants on one leg at a time. John, and I'm going to actually see him today. And, it's just funny because I'm not wrapped up in all this. He knows all these famous people. And he says, do you want to meet him? Not really.
You just don't find that interesting.
No, I'm more interested in seeing how I can help people because I was that kid that people helped growing up.
You grew up without very much money at all.
I grew up in a house of 1,400 square feet. And my dad died early. And it was difficult. But I knew that I did not want to do manual labor. I worked as a brick tender one summer. I put in concrete garage floors, and I put sidewalks in. I said, this is great, but there's got to be a better way.
That can be a powerful motivation.
Oh, it's really powerful when you have no food and no money. It really makes a huge difference in your life. And, it's hard because, my kids didn't grow up like that. And a lot of these kids today, they would not have any idea. And it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut and tell people.
Yeah, because you've had this experience. You famously have a story about how even when your family had very little money and you had a job that, was paying you barely anything, but your dad was still insistent that you should give 20% of this money to people in more need than you were.
It's interesting. We kind of grew up religious, and I wanted this red coat from Go Big Red.
This was an Omaha thing?
Well, it's Nebraska.
Okay, yes.
That football team, and so.
My lack of knowledge of Nebraska football.
It used to be the thing, but they haven't done so well lately. But I wanted that coat, and the story is I'm 10 years old, and my dad, let's say the coat was $10. It's easy to multiply. And he says, he did pay me 25 cents an hour. So, Friday comes before Shabbos, and he says, let's settle up. So he takes 10 $1 bills, puts 5 in a pile, 3 in a pile, and 2 in a pile. And I'm looking at him. And we called him sir. And he says, he called me young man. Young man, how would you like to start? I said, sir, whatever you think is appropriate. He says, we did a good job. Here's $5. Now, this coat's 10. And I'm looking at him. And he says, the $3, we're partners. You like the roof over your head? You like the food on the table? Thank you for being such a great partner. And then he says, the $2, and he says, what does the Torah teach you? Well, you're supposed to give 10% of what you make. He says, we're not a 10% family. We're a 20% family. So thank you. I'm 10 years old, fat little kid, and I run upstairs crying.
I think most 10-year-olds would.
Oh, I was just devastated.
That coat was within your grasp.
I know. I thought Monday morning I was, the blue laws, weren't shopping on Saturdays. I thought, Monday I'm going to get that coat. And so he comes up after an hour and says, we've missed dinner. That's not. I would suggest you have two chances here. You can quit on me, or get up and you can work another 40 hours. And the same thing happened, and I got that red coat.
You just had to work harder.
I did.
Giving away that 20% is, I know you have famously given a lot of money to a lot of causes. Is that 20% something that's still in your head? Is that the right marker?
I think I probably give more than that away.
Yeah.
Because, I've been fortunate. My kids, everybody has what they need. And, if I can help someone, I think it's really important because, again, people help me. And I remember, how many cars do you need? How many pairs of pants do you need? How many glasses you need? You can only wear things one at a time. And I really, I'm not interested in having my favorite restaurant in town is Truffles. Okay, it's nice, but it's not.
You're not going to spend the $500 for a meal there.
No, and it's good. I like Tom Sanders Any Guns. I still drink Macallan's, but I also drink Dewar's. It's nice, but helping people is really where I am. And through this downtown, I hope to change the region. I joined the Regional Business Council with Kathy Osborne. I was the 20th of the 20 people, and I don't know how they found me because, she called and said, would you like, I said, well, I'm nobody. Well, this isn't, the blue bloods. We want to get people. So I've been there now, I think 25 years.
I'm curious about your relationship with St. Louis. You moved here in 1983. And you're now at a point of your career, you could live anywhere. You're doing all this work in other cities. Have you ever been tempted to say, this place is too screwed up. I can maybe be here part-time to manage my projects. I'm going to go live somewhere else.
No, I have no interest. I do have a house in Denver. I have a house in Steamboat. I have no interest. I like living here.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's because when I remember moving here in 1983 in November, and St. Louis had all these Fortune 400 companies and all the blue bloods. And I've watched it kind of slowly, I wish everybody would get along. Right? Everybody's counting everybody else's money. And everybody does a good job of talking. Stop talking. Do something. Make these projects happen for St. Louis. That's what I'm trying to do. The Greenway project downtown. I don't live downtown, but, Andy
that
Taylor.
brick line.
Yeah, the brick line. They've done a great job.
It's
and I said, here,
cool.
I'll give you some money and here's some ideas. Or, I've been involved in a lot of nonprofits that are not just Jewish. People think I just give to Jewish causes. No. Coca, I helped them build their building. But I like living here.
It sounds like you've made an extraordinary community here. Like there's so many people that you know and that you feel like you've learned from, but I'm sure there's also people who've learned from you. What do you think is the secret coming in as an outsider to sort of making those sort of deep connections?
It was hard. The first question is everybody said, where'd you go to high school? And I said, I went to Westside High School in Omaha. I grew up in Omaha. I wanted to live in the Midwest. I lived in Kansas City. I like Kansas City. Kansas City has blown it out of the water because they all cooperate. So how do we cooperate? I think, not being political, but I think Kara's going to do a good job. And everybody says, well, it's taken long. Well, this isn't like flipping a light switch. I think Sam Page has done a good job. I think these people are really working hard for what they're trying to do. Dan Hurt for the mayor. I've known him 1995.
Mayor of Chesterfield.
Mayor of Chesterfield. I've known him for 30 years. Everybody's trying to make it a better place. And how do we do that? And I was happy to see that they're going to build a police something.
A regional training facility.
Right. Okay. But they all came together.
Yeah.
And the Regional Business Council, the mission is to bring the region. There's 17 different counties involved. And probably that was why I like St. Louis so much. So I get to see people and I get to meet people. And I'm not impressed that you run a Fortune 500 company. Just be nice. Everybody can do something. How do we make the place better?
And I guess last question today, do you feel like, you mentioned these two leaders right now, Kara Spencer, Sam Page. You like what they're doing. Do you think we're on the right track right now and just need to be patient, that this is almost like your Chesterfield plans and it's going to take time to come to fruition? Or do you think there's some big things that need to change before this region can really get its act together?
I think they're on the right track. I really do. They're trying to do what's right for the region, but it doesn't happen overnight. As I have a saying, Rome wasn't built in a day or destroyed in a day. And really, it's going to take some time to get there. But I hope my project in Chesterfield will redefine the region, elevate the region. It's a regional play. This isn't like trying to steal people from downtown or taking people from Clayton. Let's bring more people here and allow the big corporations to see we have something. Because if they see something like this, they're going to say, well, maybe we want to move our headquarters here. That's really what I'm interested in, is how to get better employment. I'm working with a couple companies that are in Kansas City, and they said, well, I really like what you're doing in downtown Chesterfield. We're thinking about maybe moving an office there. And the office they want to put in is 120,000 feet. So, in fact, I have a meeting this afternoon on that very subject matter. So that's what I'm really trying to do. And, the other thing is I did listen to the citizens out there. What do you want? What don't you want? We're fixing the traffic on Clarkson Road. I don't have to fix it for 5 years. But I said to my group, it's the right thing to do now. And the mall actually had more traffic at different times than we have. So I'm just trying to figure out how to let people know good things can happen.
Michael Steinberg, I appreciate that note of optimism. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Michael is the founder and president of the Steinberg Group. In just a moment, we'll hear from St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Kroll. He'll tell us all about a canceled St. Louis County company that may be coming back to respectability, and how St. Louis County Police seem ready to reopen that controversial relationship. First, though, a word from our sponsor. This episode of the 314 podcast is supported by Kranzberg Arts Foundation's Mati. Mati is back September 12th through September 14th. 3 days, 15 stages, and over 100 unforgettable performances. Catch legends like Common and Pete Rock, Patti LaBelle and De La Soul. Groove with R&B stars Lucky Day and Leon Thomas. Feel the soul of jazz with Branford Marsalis and Pedrito Martinez. And bring the funk with John Medeski and the SOS Band. Enjoy live music, art exhibits, food trucks, vendors, and good vibes, all in the streets of the Grand Center Arts District. Grab your passes now at matistl.org. And now for the closer. Last year, police in both St. Louis City and County severed ties with one of their more generous benefactors. That's the local nutrition supplement company First Form. The reason? The remarks the company's outspoken founder had made about female cops. Police Union President Derek Mawkins said financial contributions from First Form, quote, cannot come at the expense of our integrity, our morals, and the respect owed to not only our women officers, but all the members of our police family. But now, St. Louis Magazine's Ryan Kroll reports, that resolve seems to be crumbling. And Ryan joins us now to tell us all about it. Ryan Kroll, welcome.
Thanks, Sarah. Happy to talk on a podcast about a controversial podcast.
Yes, it's so meta.
Yeah.
So take us back to September 2024. How did First Form founder Andy Frisella set off what ended up being a national firestorm?
Sure. So he was on his Real AF podcast where he just sort of riffs on the day's news and that sort of thing with a few other people. And somehow female police officers came up, that topic. And he said that he didn't think women should be cops, which on its face is going to upset a lot of people just like that.
Sure.
But in addition to that, he kind of also sort of made the comments with like a little bit of menace, sort of that was the tone where he said something along the lines of, it's not right for someone to be a cop because if they didn't have a badge and a gun, you could, I think he said, punch a hole in their face. So it just kind of
Speaking of women,
so
exactly. That's ugly.
Yeah, exactly. So it was both the sort of content and the sort of which would have been enough to kind of cause a firestorm. But I think it was especially sort of a big deal because of just kind of the way, the sort of extremely coarse way it was communicated.
So I read that quote just now from the president of the union that represents St. Louis County police officers. And it seemed like St. Louis County, St. Louis City, they were slamming this door so hard. They did not want to work with this company going forward. When did you start catching wind that the vibe had changed?
Yeah. So some people were kind of texting behind the scenes. And what they were saying, and it kind of depended on who you asked, either folks who were maybe a little bit more, generous kind of with the way that things were shifting were saying, well, hey, look, First Form had been kind of like a staunch supporter of the police and of first responders. They'd given a lot of money to the like organizations like Backstoppers.
That supports officers wounded in the line of duty.
Exactly. And that the argument went like, is it really fair to kind of punish hundreds of employees or sort of blacklist hundreds of employees when for the comments of just one guy whose affiliation with the company is very tenuous at this point.
Because he was the founder.
He was.
He's not currently the CEO.
Exactly. And it's really hard to tell, but as far as I can tell, he wasn't the CEO last year either. And I don't know exactly what his role has been. I sort of think it's a little bit analogous to the to like Ray Hartman and St. Louis Magazine, where in the kind of collective imagination, people may associate those two.
But no longer the case.
Exactly.
On the other hand, isn't this founder's brother running the company?
There you go.
We are not being run by the brother of Ray
Sure.
Hartman, if there is even a brother.
Exactly. No analogy is perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So Sal Frizella, who is Andy Frizella's brother, is the current, was and is the CEO of First Form.
Okay, so the guy who made these remarks still had some ties to this company, but you could sense this thawing of the ice.
Exactly. And again, some people said, well, it's just time to, Andy has apologized. His brother immediately condemned the comments, sort of contemporaneous to them being made. Why don't we bring him back into the fold? And the sort of more, I guess the people less generous to the police were saying, well, First Form, they drop a lot of free stuff off at the precincts, and these cops just want their free stuff. So that was the kind of conversation. That's where it was at when I became included in it.
What did you find out about, this reconciliation?
Sure. So I talked to the executive director of the St. Louis County Police Officers Association, which is the union for officers in the county, and he said that this was going to happen. There was going to be a reconciliation eventually. It's just a matter of time. And he said that from what he was hearing, there's basically kind of like three schools of thought among his rank and file. There was folks who were still very upset. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with the First Form. They were never going to buy, First Form was never going to get $1 of their money ever again. Then there were other folks who said, kind of like I said before, why are we punishing this whole company for the words of one man? And, isn't it time we sort of bury the hatchet, so to speak? And then he said the biggest thing was like for most guys, both guys and gals in this case, they didn't care one way or the other. They thought we got bigger fish to fry. We're short staffed. Our jobs are hard enough as is without having to worry about, protein drinks.
So part of what made the union so certain this was happening, it sounds like the chief had a meeting where he kind of let people air their feelings.
Yeah, so I think he sort of sensed the same sort of vibe shift that I was getting. So yeah, he had a listening session with female officers where he wanted to hear their concerns, how kind of take the temperature of how they would feel about a potential, reconciliation, reopening ties, that kind of thing. So there was a meeting with just the chief, the deputy chief, and then female officers. And I don't really, everyone's kind of been tight-lipped about that. I don't know exactly what was said. I think you can probably guess that a lot of these female officers are still very upset about these comments. Whether or not they were blaming the company for them anymore is another issue.
So something I thought was interesting, sometimes when we write about controversial subjects, we'll hear from a lot of people who are like, here's my perspective on this. I'm really wound up. I'm upset about this. To the best of my knowledge, that didn't happen here. I don't think we heard from female cops who are saying, I want to keep this door closed.
Yeah. I wonder if it, I feel just in generally speaking kind of broadly, police officers often are not the sort of most chatty when it comes to their dealing with the media.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's a reason that, or if this has sort of been a very internal sort of debate for a reason. But also, too, I imagine that for a lot of these female officers, they're just like everyone else. They're sort of more concerned about the day-to-day grind than they are about, First Form.
So what's your best guess of what will happen here?
I have to imagine that the executive director of the union knows what he's talking about, and there will be some kind of reconciliation. I guess the one thing that I do wonder about, though, was it would upset me, though, if this was kind of a done deal. And it turns out that this meeting the police chief had was just something kind of like a fig leaf. Like this, I'm not saying this was the case, but if it is, I think this is a way that some people could interpret what happened, that he knew this was going to happen. So we had this listening session to get people's thoughts, even though he sort of knew what the ultimate outcome was going to be anyway. If that proved to be the case, I think kind of ironically, that is maybe the one thing that could sort of derail the whole reconciliation to begin with. So that's that's a wrinkle that I guess we'll have to kind of see how it plays out.
We will see how it plays out. Ryan Kroll, staff writer at St. Louis Magazine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Sarah Fensky. That's the 314 for today. You can find out more in our podcast show notes and at stlmag.com. You can also find both me and Ryan every day in your inbox. That's thanks to St. Louis Magazine's fantastic free newsletter, St. Louis Daily. It's a fresh take on St. Louis with insight and original reporting. Sign up at stlmag.com/newsletters. The 314 is a production of St. Louis Magazine. I'm Sarah Fensky, and this is the 314. See you next time.